Welcome, everybody, to the Yes Labels podcast. I'm Justin Clark here with Bill Stepien. After a brief hiatus, we are back and back at it with a lot of news on the presidential front. What are you hearing out there, Bill?
It's New York Times Siena Poll Week, Justin.
It is New York Times Siena Poll Week. It sure is.
The New York Times and Siena College partnered to poll almost 3,700 registered voters across a swath of battleground or likely battleground states for 2024: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. English and Spanish interviews on cell phones and landlines from October 22 to November 3rd. So these polls have gotten a lot of attention this week. I thought it might make some sense to run through some of the top line numbers, some of the state by state numbers, if that was okay by you.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I'll jump in here first. As you said, they polled Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Combined in that battleground state, the overall battleground state survey, Donald Trump leading Joe Biden 48% to 44%. That is Donald Trump plus 4. And I think what we're going to do here today is go into some of the numbers nationally and in some of the states that we found interesting to talk about and go through them. I'll start. You have that battleground combined survey of 48-44 Trump over Biden. I want to go to women for a second, or gender in general. In the combined survey, you have Trump over Biden 55%, 37% among men, and women, Trump 42%, Biden 50%. Gender gap, not surprising. We've probably had it for the last 50 years in politics. But what I find interesting, and again, these are battleground numbers, and I'm going to compare them to 2020 exit poll results, which I think are a decent comparison, but they're not spot on. But I think it's important as a baseline. According to the 2020 exit polls, Trump led men 11 points in 2020, and Biden led among women by 12 points. So that is a 7-point improvement for Trump and a 4-point loss for Biden among men and women, respectively, which is really, really a big move, a big movement. As Bill, you and I have talked about, there's always talk about white suburban women. As we know, what really cost Donald Trump the 2020 election was white suburban men. That vote really deteriorating, and this seems to be a sign that they may be coming back. I want to go one more step further down here. You have Biden a +8 among women in this survey. When asked about which candidate voters thought would best handle the issue of abortion, which hear a lot in the news day after an election day about abortion being a huge driver for the election in 2024 and Democrats making it their issue. So Biden's a +8 among women in this Siena survey. Female voters believe Biden is best to handle abortion, but that's at a +18. So that's a pretty big drop off from, hey, abortion's going to be the thing that drives a bunch of votes, to actual favorability. Not surprisingly, tells us that voters care about other stuff other than abortion, and it may not be the silver bullet that Democrats hope for. Overall, too, this is all really bad news for Biden, which I don't think we need to cover. That's been covered in the press quite a bit, but I thought those numbers were really interesting. The deterioration on the gender side of things overall.
Is that Bidenomics, Justin? Women pay more attention to bills, household expenses, things that have been really impacted with inflation in the last couple of years. Is it something else? What do you think?
I mean, the movement among men is worse than the movement among women. I think driving all of these numbers, if you go down into the issue set on stuff, 29% of voters say the economy is only fair. 52% say it's poor. You look at voters 18 to 29, which should be a Democrat layup in terms of votes. You know, Biden's only winning them by 1. And voters think the 18 to 29 voters think Trump is the best to handle the economy at 28 by 28 points. I mean, it's just across the board. People think the economy stinks and they blame Joe Biden for it. I can't read it any other way.
I would love to go. I think New York Times, Siena polled, I think 6 different battleground states. I'd love to just spend a little bit of time talking top line numbers very briefly, and then either you or I, or I don't know, both, we'll see, talk about a fact, a number, a figure that was particularly interesting, if that worked for you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Where do you want to go first? Georgia? Can we go Georgia first?
Go for it.
Top line numbers in Georgia: Trump +6 over Biden. Trump at 49, Biden at 43. I think the number that I found most interesting, fairly deep into the crosstabs, is that Trump is currently winning 95% of those who voted for him in 2020. If you've cast a ballot for Trump in 2020, 95% of those folks plan to vote for him again in 2024. Only 2% of those who voted for him in 20 aren't currently planning to do so now. 95 to 2. For Biden, 9% of those who voted for him aren't planning to do so again. 9%. To me, Justin, that's a lot of buyer's remorse for Biden voters. Look, and I get, look, Georgia voted in 2020, obviously for Joe Biden. Georgia last voted for a Democrat presidential candidate all the way back in 1992. I get that some or a lot of what happened in 2020 regarding Biden's win was due to a state's changing demographics, a lot of new movers. Part of it is just that change. But in 2020, a lot of voters went against the grain of how they usually vote in Georgia. And a lot of people who don't usually vote Democrat voted for Joe Biden. Those 9% of Biden voters who aren't voting for him, they represent 220,000 votes. I'll remind you, Justin, in case you somehow forgot, the race in 2020 in Georgia was kind of close. I think it was 11,000 plus votes. So this buyer's remorse group of 9% of Biden voters from 2020 who aren't currently planning to vote for him again in 24, it's kind of a big deal.
It's a problem. It's a big problem for him. And they're running out of time to do anything about it. I'm not like a big person who thinks you should always run on economic issues, but you look through the tabs in Georgia, and this thing is driven largely by young voters, and and largely by a dissatisfaction with how the economy is going. This poll has Biden losing 18 to 29-year-olds, losing them, which is insane. People keep talking about how Biden can fix this. Sure, but he's actually got to fix it. And rolling into an election 1 year out, less than a year out at this point, with 9% of the people that voted for you in 2020 not voting for you this time, it, like you said, it's a real problem, and it represents a huge chunk of votes. And Donald Trump is exactly, if Georgia's a 50-50 state, Donald Trump's at 49%. He's right where he needs to be. And he's in a position of right now trying to add to his total where Biden's trying to dig out of a hole and getting to a point where there's enough saturation and people know enough about each of these candidates that getting out of that hole is really problematic. Really problematic.
Good points.
I'm going to turn to Arizona next, which I think it's always a tricky state for us, as we've talked about since 2016. Actually, the southwestern United States swing states, so Nevada and Arizona, have always kind of had more of a rosy view on Donald Trump than the actual results of elections did. He always kind of overpolled there, whereas he seriously underpolled in states in the Midwest, so Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. I say all that I say all that because I'm looking here at a number in the crosstabs in the Hispanic vote. You've got Donald Trump at 41% of the Hispanic vote in Arizona. Let me start with the top line. You have Trump winning the state 49-44, +5 over Biden. As we know, the state was actually, I think, closer than Georgia, but it was right in the same ballpark, decided by right around 10,000 votes. Hispanic number, Trump losing by 14 points. That number for the Democrats, so it's Trump 41, Biden 55. That number for Biden to get it to a tie in Arizona needs to be closer to 70%. And all of that put together, going back to my first point about the Southwest being a difficult or kind of over polling for Trump, that was always because we believed the sampling in terms of the number of Hispanic voters they had in the survey was off, not because he was polling particularly well with that group. But this number is staggering and a real problem for Biden. You know, as we've seen from 16 to 20, Donald Trump made serious inroads with Hispanic men, and it was disparate around the country. You know, disparate group of, you can't lump everybody who's Hispanic into one group, but the one group that kind of stuck, that didn't move as much, were voters in Arizona and Nevada. If this number's to be believed and to be right, and I have no reason to think that it isn't, that is a real problem for Joe Biden. And I don't know how he fixes that one either.
Yeah, and to your point about the Southwest, smart point regarding Hispanics in Arizona, he's got a similar problem, not to jump ahead or spoil Nevada, but he's got a similar problem in Nevada, right, where he's tied.
Yeah.
So really, really smart stuff by you there. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I want to talk about, well, actually, this isn't a broken record. This is party reg. In Arizona, here's the number I found interesting, Justin. Biden is winning 92% of Democrats. Makes sense. That's a kind of a decent place to be, I guess. Trump is only winning 90% of Republicans. To me, that is a continuation of a problem from 2020 for Trump. According to exit polling, Biden won 96% of Democrats in 2020, while Trump only won 90% of Republicans. So Trump underperforming among the party base happened in 2020, if you believe exit polls. It's happening right now, if you believe this New York Times poll. And, you know, I think there could be some lingering issues among Republicans for Trump in Arizona. Trump clashed with Jeff Flake, right? Sitting U.S. Senator, 6-term congressman, you know, famously fought, I think for good reason, with Jeff Flake. But, you know, he was one of their own. He clashed with Doug Ducey, popular 2-term governor. Did in 2018, a bad midterm year for Republicans. I think he won by 12 or 14 points in his reelection. John McCain, obviously an institution in the state. Do these things add up and hurt Trump's number in Arizona? I don't know, but they can't help, is my point. So
they can't help.
Agree with your points regarding, yeah.
But I'll add one thing to that. Just as like Biden needs to fix his Democratic problem, and Trump needs to fix his Republican problem, to have that number in Arizona and still have a 5-point lead is pretty telling. And it's something that can get fixed. So it's a great point. Great point. Where do you want to go next, Bill?
I'll stay on Nevada just because I went into it. He's winning women 47-45, the only state polled where that's happening. He's winning college educated voters 48-45, the only state polled where that's happening. But I'm going to put all that aside, and I'll remind you, I should have started with this. Trump is top line number. Trump is beating Biden 52-41. Trump is beating Biden 52-41 statewide in Nevada. I mentioned the numbers among women he's winning, the college educated numbers he's winning. But I'm going to put all that aside, Justin. Clark County.
Best name of a county in America.
Clark County, we know 7 in 10 votes in a general election are going to come from Clark County. So 7 and 10, it's a supremely important county. It's kind of the ball game in most races in Nevada. Trump is winning Clark County by 5, winning 50-45 over Biden. Biden won it by 10 in 2020. So a 15-point swing in Clark County. Politics is a math equation, and the math just doesn't work for Biden if Trump ties or even loses Clark County in the low single digits. So a big statewide number. He's up by 11, 52-41. Clark County being up by 5 points is a huge deal for Trump.
It's like you said, it's the whole deal. And Trump's number in Clark County is at 50%. If he can just keep it at 50% and get it to a tie, he wins Nevada. One thing that's interesting here, Biden has no advantage among Hispanic voters in Nevada. Again, it makes up 25% of the survey, but they're tied at 45. If that number's to be believed, then again, I don't have any reason not to believe it. I don't know how Biden can win Nevada if these numbers stay close. I mean, I'll put it this way. With Clark County and the Hispanic vote the way it is in this survey, I'm shocked that Trump's only up by 11.
Mm-hmm.
Shocked. Let's go to the Midwest next. We'll hit Michigan. So
you love Michigan.
Yeah. Michigan, a state that Donald Trump won in 2016 by a hair, lost by a hair in 2020. A state that is hard for a Republican to win because Wayne County, which is Detroit, the Detroit metro area, is such a huge part of the vote. And the Democrats basically need to just, if they hit their number in Wayne County, it's very hard for a Republican to win statewide there. New York Times Siena poll has Trump up 48-43 on Biden. That is a +5. The number I want to look at here, and I think it's pretty important, is the independent number. So predictably, Democrats support Joe Biden 93% to 4%. Republicans support Trump 90% to 6%. Independents, which make up over a third of the electorate in Michigan, have a similar 5-point advantage for Trump, 47-42, mirrors the statewide almost exactly. That number to me tells the whole story of Michigan, and it probably tells the whole story of most of the Midwest. If independent voters are breaking for Donald Trump in states like this, where you have a pretty stable population, unlike Arizona and Nevada, where you have people moving in and out all the time, you have a lot of different racial components. The demographics of the upper Midwest are and have remained relatively stable. And so it's still kind of that traditional independent voter game. If Donald Trump is winning independent voters by 5 points in a place like Michigan, it probably means he's winning independent voters by 5 points almost everywhere. And it means he wins the election if he can keep it there. I think it's a really, it indexes exactly to the overall vote, which again, for a state like Michigan isn't surprising, but I think it's noteworthy.
Did you see the number among those who didn't vote in 2020?
Yeah, that was going to be my next point, but get after it. Go for it.
Trump is winning 55-27 among those who did not vote in 2020. The biggest number of any state polled, which was wild to me. Did you have any? I have a thought or two on that. Do you have any?
I mean, my thought on it is, and the demographic, or the geographic breakdown of this isn't the best.
Right.
But, one of the things that lagged in 2020 was, and we saw this last night in elections like in Kentucky and Mississippi, was rural turnout. And I think, we saw this in 2020, Bill, where sometimes you had like statistically significant percentages of people who attended Trump rallies who weren't even registered to vote. So people would go and wait at a rally for hours, and we had to struggle and drag people out to vote. I think I'd be shocked if that number wasn't largely rural voters who either didn't want to or couldn't or didn't vote in 2020. What's your theory on that?
That rural piece and the anecdote from the Trump rallies is a pretty smart one. Um, we're guessing here, right? We're surmising what this could mean. One theory, which was the first thing I thought of when I looked at that number, was a big piece of the puzzle to win 2024 is going to be which candidate can win the votes of those voters who don't like any candidate. I don't like Trump. I don't like Biden. And my thought is, if you didn't vote in 2020, yeah, there's a chance you didn't vote because you forgot. Yeah, there's a chance you didn't vote because I got stuck at work. But there's also a good chance you didn't vote in 2020 because you were protesting the election. You sat it out because they're both bums. I can't stomach supporting either one. The fact that Trump has a 27-point lead among these non-2020 voters, it not only gives him a chance to turn out new voters. That's hard, I get it, but and get new votes. But to me, that there's also a potential bigger point about what this means in the bigger picture of the I hate both guys crowd and who they're currently lining up behind.
So
So
that's a really interesting point. And that was a big deal in 2016, right?
Yep.
And if this is some kind of indicator of how those voters are going, that's bad news for Joe Biden.
I guess I should talk about Pennsylvania.
Yeah, go
Justin,
for it.
Since I'm sitting here now, Trump up 4 statewide in the New York Times poll, 48-44, 48-44 Trump plus 4. The number that stuck out to me were the numbers they define them as the Philadelphia suburbs. Biden famously won the 4 Philadelphia suburban collar counties, Bucks, Delaware, Montgomery, Chester, by 288,000, which was a full 100,000 more votes margin than Clinton won over Trump, plus 100K out of those 4 counties alone. He won by 19 over Trump in 20. That's 5 better than Clinton in 2016. This poll has Biden winning those 4 counties only by 6. That's a 13-point drop in a crucial part of the state. Similar to Nevada, Justin, the math just doesn't work for Biden statewide if he only wins suburban Philly, honestly, anywhere in the single digits. It's plus 6 for Biden. If that number is anywhere in the single digits, heck, even the low double digits, the math just doesn't work for Biden in the state.
Yeah, that's a huge point. Those middle class white males that I talked about before, that was the most acute component of the 2020 election. That was most acutely seen in Pennsylvania and the Pennsylvania suburbs. People often forget that the city of Philadelphia got a lot of attention in 2020, but made up a smaller share of the overall statewide vote than it did in 2016, which means it mattered less. Those votes came from suburban and exurban areas around Philadelphia. And if Joe Biden can't win those and win those by a lot, he can't win Pennsylvania because the rurals are going to come out there. We do have a rural turnout problem, like I said, but those are going to be some overwhelming numbers in some different types of areas in Pennsylvania. So you're dead on. It's going to be a big problem for him. Big problem for him.
Why don't you stay in the Midwest and hit Wisconsin?
Yeah. So Wisconsin's the only state surveyed in this New York Times Siena poll that has Biden beating Trump, and he's beating him 47-45. The thing that sticks out to me is actually a comparison to the other states, and it goes to income level. So in all the other states, Trump was either winning or very close in every income category. Here, it kind of reverts to form in terms of the traditional Democrat versus Republican fight. And voters under 50,000 who make under $50,000 a year preferred Biden to Trump 57-35. Again, Trump or Biden were either leading by small single digits in all of the other states, but here you have a Biden 22-point lead, which again is reflected in the Milwaukee numbers where he has a 60% lead, 77-17, or in Milwaukee proper, rather, and in Dane County, which is college town for sure. But he's got a 38-point lead. Wisconsin is, again, the top line is 47-45, but of all the states surveyed here, is performing exactly like you would expect Wisconsin to perform. I think I've said it on this podcast before, but I've certainly said it to everybody everywhere. Somebody, either Joe Biden or Donald Trump, is going to win Wisconsin by 20,000 votes. And the traditional economic messaging will matter almost more than anything. How people are feeling, how people are doing. Interesting to me that this state, in terms of the polling for New York Times Siena, seems to reflect that. And that under 50K number lines up with where everything else is. But Wisconsin was an outlier in terms of these states because it had Biden with a small lead. But I think it accurately reflects how close the state will be. And that was the most interesting take on that by my account.
Yeah, I similarly looked at the income brackets. I looked at the 50K to 100K, where Biden was winning by 5, which is a 10-point swing. Trump won by 5 in 2020. And I mean, I guess I'm surprised to see Biden's improvement, especially among this 50 to 100K income group, because you'd think that the higher gas prices and grocery prices and interest rates would all be especially impactful here. But Bidenomics, baby. Cheese heads are buying into the Bidenomics.
But even then, you're looking at, it's kind of interesting, right? They break it out into 3 income categories: under 50K, 50K to 100, and over 100K. You have Biden winning by 22 under 50K, basically a tie, 51-46, 50K to 100, and Trump winning over 100K plus 12. I mean, if you did a poll in 2004 with Bush versus Kerry, that's probably how it looked. The remarkable stability of it is the most interesting part to me here. But yeah, you're right. I mean, overall, and just like 30,000 foot takeaway on this is you've got a incumbent president, a year out from an election. And this is consistent with the other surveys that have come out this week too, who has a real problem on his hands because people are unhappy and they blame him. And TBD whether he has the political chops and the wherewithal and the mental acuity to pull out of that. And I think we're in for 2016 was a very close election. 2020 was even closer. And I think 2024 could potentially be a replay of both.
Well, Justin, I mean, there have been some numbers that have been deemed outliers that were bad for Biden, good for Trump. There was Bloomberg did a similar set of state by state numbers in late October, and they showed, I looked them up this morning, similarly good things for Trump, bad things for Biden. Arizona, Trump winning by 4. Georgia, Trump winning by 5. Michigan tied. Nevada, they had Biden winning by 3. North Carolina, Trump was +4. Pennsylvania, Trump was +1. Wisconsin was +2. So this wasn't some poll out of left field that we talked about in the New York Times Siena poll. I mean, this was, to your point, very consistent with numbers that poll after poll is showing. And as we've talked about on past podcasts, Justin, these numbers didn't exist in 2020. We searched high, we searched low for any poll that showed even nuggets of good news, let alone polls that had Trump winning. They weren't out there. They didn't exist.
Bill, they didn't really exist in 2016 either. I mean, this is Donald Trump is in the best polling position he's ever been in his political career. And it's kind of not close.
Yep. Totally agree. We're taping this. We're taping this on Wednesday, November 8th. And I just have one more point, one more takeaway, Justin, before we wrapped. Last night, Tuesday, November 7th, was a very good night for Democrats. We just talked about the strength of Trump in these 6 battleground states. And you turn on the news on Wednesday morning, you hear a lot of chatter about Trump being a drag on the ticket, on the results last night, being used as a boogeyman in these races, being used as the reason Republicans lost by these cable news commentators. you kind of can't have it both ways,
No.
right? Think about the numbers we just discussed. You can't have him beating Biden in 5 of these 6 swing states, and as the New York Times themselves said, on a pathway to 300 electoral votes, and then blame him when we lose state house seats in Virginia. Like, don't blame Trump.
It's garbage.
Don't blame Trump if a Republican loses to a Democrat in Kentucky, a state that Trump won 62-36, right? That didn't happen because Trump endorsed the Republican. That happened because the Democrat governor is a talented politician and ran a better campaign. In Virginia, Democrats retook you live there, retook full control of the state house. Glenn Youngkin got a lot of credit when he won in 2021, and he should have. But similarly, don't blame Trump if you lose seats in your state house last night in 2023. Ohio, we talked about on a previous podcast, the ballot measure issue 1. It will now protect abortion in Ohio state constitution, won by double digits last night. Blame the deep-pocketed pro-life groups in D.C., right, who are out-messaged, as we talked about, out-organized, beaten yet again by their pro-choice counterparts. And by the way, side note, thanks to what happened in Ohio last night, we're not going to see pro-choicers. We're going to see them trying to rinse and repeat, putting ballot measures on the November ballot next year, 1 year from now. If you want to blame Trump for losses in 2018 in the midterms, like every president's blamed, fine, do that. But don't blame him for losses in Bucks County, Pennsylvania last night.
No.
We just went over his numbers in suburban counties. All these people, MSNBC, Chris Christie, Republican critics, this is not the day, this is not the time to point the finger and criticize them. There's a lot of chances for you to do that, but not today. I mean, one of the few places, Justin, we had successes last night, or Republicans had successes last night, was in Trump's backyard in Long Island, right, where Republicans flipped the county executive seat in Suffolk County from blue to red, right outside New York City, Long Island. And Republicans now control all countywide seats in Nassau County and in Suffolk County. And before I'm scoffed at for talking about county seats on Long Island, if Long Island were a state, they'd be the 14th largest state in the country, larger than Arizona. So Not a small deal. And that happened in Trump's backyard on Long Island. So blame the party organizations who didn't drive turnout. Blame the third party groups who dropped the ball again. Blame the candidates who were actually in the ballot. Oh, how about that? But when the numbers that we just went through are as strong as they are for Trump, you can't blame Trump. You just can't.
No, you can't. I had a good friend of mine, say this morning that their biggest takeaway on this was that Donald Trump is more popular than the Republican Party generically, and Joe Biden is less popular than the Democratic Party generically. And I think that's probably right. I think you've got a lot of Republicans right now in D.C. and running races in states who are running races like they are in the Republican Party of 2004. And they are wrong on messaging. They're wrong on policy initiatives. We are a party that is socioeconomically, the mean of this party is declining socioeconomically, yet we still have messages like, it's the George W. Bush reelect in 2004, and all we've got to do is give everyone a privatized Social Security account and they're going to vote for us. Like that is long gone. And you've got a lot of people who are kind of stuck in that messaging arc and they can't get out of it. And it's a real problem for Republicans. Also, that socioeconomic thing, we've said it a bunch of times here before, Bill. The Republican Party is now the party that has lower turnout in midterm elections because of that socioeconomic component. We need to do a better job getting people out to the polls. That won't happen in 2024. People will show up and vote because A, it's a presidential year, so it's kind of in their face more, but B, Donald Trump's going to be on the ballot. There were major rural turnout issues in Kentucky and in Mississippi last night that hurt Republicans. And it's on the elections, it's on the messaging, it's on all the things I just talked about to make sure that happens. And one note on abortion, Bill, and I've talked about it before, like you're dead right. If you want to win these issues and you want to win these fights, then do it. But, and I'm someone who is is a believer in the cause, politically, the issue of abortion rights and enshrining them in the law and the Constitution is a bipartisan issue right now, whether people like it or not. I think I'm less worried than you are about having abortion ballot measures put on the ballot in a presidential year, because I think turnout's going to be like pretty close to 100% anyway. And the other reason I'm less worried about it than you is because it's not like it's a Democrat-Republican issue. Republicans are coming out and voting to enshrine abortion rights in constitutions. So, there's a lot of stuff from 2024 that was interesting about last night. I think the Democrats are probably going to take some wrong lessons from it, but that's fine. But you're dead on. To blame Donald Trump for anything that went on in last night's elections is just dumb. If anything, like, he probably helped a little bit. But anyway, I think that's all the time we've got for this week, everybody. Before we go, if you like what you heard, subscribe to our podcast, share it with your friends, like it, comment, only good ones, please. And we'll talk to you soon. See you next week.